Hi, everybody. This is Sherry. I am the CEO and co founder of Peak. We're an AI powered personal finance platform that helps you track, manage, and grow your net worth. I'm super excited to be having my very first interview with ordinary people who do extraordinary things with money. Today, I have Shao. He's based in Singapore, and he started a channel recently called 9 to 5 Millionaire Mindset, where he shares stories, very honest, authentic stories around how he had an experience with a layoff from Google and then how he actually is able to find financial freedom. Shao, really, really good to chat with you today. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me, Sherry. I'm excited to share my story and also learn from your journey and interact with your audience.
For sure. So, Shao, maybe just to get started, tell us a little bit more from where it began, right? So, where did you start out your career, and how did you kind of, decide on working in big tech?
Sure. Maybe I'll start with where I graduated. So I'm from Singapore. I never had the opportunity to live outside of Singapore for a long time. So most of my career and education is here. So I graduated with a degree in finance. And the first thing that I wanted to do upon graduation is to work in investment banking, in fact, bulge bracket investment banking, because when I was young, that was the place to go to make money. And at that age, money was extremely important and a huge, easy way to indicate how you're successful and whether you're on the right way. So I entered finance. I did it for about 5 years before I realized that um, it wasn't for me, or in fact, I should say 5 years before I finally accept that I am not suited for finance. And then that's how I did a pivot. And I was lucky enough to have an opportunity to move to LinkedIn as a salesperson. And I was there for a couple of years before I was very fortunate again to be referred to join Google again as a salesperson. And that's where I spent the last 8 years. I started in Google as a salesperson, covering the Singapore and Southeast Asia market. I had the opportunity to then move to StratOps, strategy and operations, to help design the sales strategy of my broader team. And my last role was actually moving back to sales, but as a people manager, managing a team of very ambitious, very energetic team of salespeople in Google, helping their customers grow. So that was just in general my entire sort of career journey so far.
Yeah. You know what's so funny is I feel a lot of similarities between our career paths. I actually interned in investment banking summer of 2013. I was at a bulge bracket bank, and honestly I went there because I was a business student in my undergrad, and that's what people were supposed to do, right? And I guess I realized very quickly it wasn't for me, and ended up working in tech. And I think it was actually because of some of my experience working on the tech deals in banking that made me realize, wow, the PE ratios are just off the chart for these tech companies. They're like doing things that are almost like there's like an infinite scale to them, right? Like there's just so much opportunity that I was like, I don't want to be on the banking side. Like I want to be on the like forefront of this. So I ended up moving to big tech and spent, basically my entire career in it until I, recently left. But I really appreciate you kind of sharing that journey. One thing that I found really interesting when you kind of started out is you talked about how making money is important. And I think sometimes there's this little stigma of saying, like, oh, making money, or I care about making money as a primary goal, because people think, okay, do you not care about other things? Like, what about, XYZ skills you want in a job, right? But I think that there is a benefit of setting yourself up well early and kind of having this base, right? And there's huge benefits when that compounds. So I wanted you to maybe walk through like how you thought about this angle of like, maximizing money or making sure that you were maximizing your earning potential early on in your career.
Sure. So I guess there's both push and pull when it comes to making any decision. I guess the push for me when it comes to making a lot of money is that I grew up with a household that isn't very financially savvy. And in fact, I grew up during the Asian financial crisis in 1997. And that's when I saw my family lost everything. We were at the risk of foreclosure. Before the internet and before digital banking, which is what Sherry, you and your company are trying to innovate, it was still very traditional, and none of your assets were actually online. So when you're going through a foreclosure, uh, the banks actually send people down to your homes, and they bring these little stickers, and they start labeling everything in your house that could be auctioned away to pay off your debt. So now, just thinking about it, I'm getting goosebumps, because that's exactly what my family went through. I came back from school and my mom was crying on the staircase. And I asked her, I mean, sitting on the floor just crying, and I asked her what happened. And she told me that the banks have sent people to come in because we're going to lose the house. They're just sticking on, like, oh, the TV, this is how much it's going to worth, the sofa, we can sell it. So that was just a big pivotal moment in terms of defining what money means to me. I never wanted to feel like that ever again, and I never wanted my family to feel like that again. So I think that was the push. That was the push that got me thinking, to start having a very unhealthy, or at least kickstarting an unhealthy relationship with money, where it mattered all the way. And I think in today's climate, in today's job market, there's also a pull factor that we can think about. It is that we used to value things like learning opportunity. We used to value things like tenure and loyalty. But given how unpredictable the job market is right now, in fact, I'm recommending all my clients and all my friends that you should be optimizing your career primarily for money, and to keep moving and getting as much as you can in terms of like seeing as a career ROI, because you just don't know how long or short your career with that particular company is going to be. So that's how I would think, both retrospectively and in the future, like how we should think about, making
Yeah.
money if you're working.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And I'm wondering, like, when you're talking to people as well, like, how do you help them cultivate a healthy relationship with money? Because it is a balance, right? Like, on one end, like, you want to make sure you have the safety cushion there because the world is really unpredictable right now. You never know what happens, like, in the macro economy. You never know what happens health wise. So it's good to have that safety net. On the other hand, when it only becomes about money, right, then that also takes away some of the things that you may enjoy, right, within what you do. So, how do you actually help people like strike the right balance?
Um, to answer that question, there are many ways to answer it, and everyone has their different interpretation. And some people, what I like to think about is, as with a lot of things in life, we shouldn't just think of it binary. It shouldn't just be like, yes, money is good, or no, money is bad. People who say things like, money is the root of all evil, is very anti-money, and then the people who then argue back and say like, yeah, you only say that because you don't have money. Then these people are also like too pro money, right? Um, I think back on what I've learned in university, where there's the hierarchy of needs. I think that money is important, and once you have that stability and
Mhm.
that security, you can then afford to have a bit more option. You can afford to do what you really want to do, be where you want to be, and I think that's the whole point of financial freedom. It's no longer where we measure it like financial freedom is how many cars or how many properties you have, or what's the digit in your bank account, but the freedom to actually then do what you really want to do, or be in a country or be in a location where you want to be. And I guess the opportunity we have right now in our various platforms, and what a lot of people are trying to do, is to get to that sense of security earlier, as fast as you can. And if that means working 9 to 5, if that means starting a company and hustling and working 18 hours a day, so be it. But once you hit that security, you then have that flexibility to do what you want. The challenge then comes with, and this is a personal journey for all of us, is that once you have that security, how long more do you want to stay in that game? Because there's never going to be enough. So I do see some people who, after working for 2 to 3 years, they're happy, they move on, they go ahead and they do their own thing. I also have seen and worked with a lot of people who are 30, 40 years veteran in the industry, making 7 digits a year. But it seems like their entire world just centers around just building up more and more of that nest egg. So I think it's really, the relationship with money is sometimes reflection of your own relationship with life and your own principles
Yeah.
and your own values. So whatever you value in life, it tends to be replicated in how your relationship with money is.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, one way that, I've heard it described to me before is, if you are the CEO of your own life, you should plan out your strategy, which is what makes you happy or fulfilled, right? So where do you want to live? What kind of hobbies do you want to have? What kind of friends? What kind of partner? Do you want to have a family? How do you want to raise a family, right? So those are the strategies or the things that you want to do. Money is a resource, right? Like money is basically what gets you to be able to do those things, or sometimes gets you to have the option of figuring it out at later times because our minds always change, right? So I think it is important to know that money kind of serves that, I guess, resource role, and it's something that, like, okay, you want to achieve maybe at a lower middle rung of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But what's really important then to figure out is once you've gotten to the point where your resource needs are met for your goals, to not keep getting into that luxury trap of wanting more, wanting more, wanting more. Because I mean, like that's just one of the greatest paths towards unhappiness, right? Because
Yes.
you can always get more. People always have more around you.
Yeah, yeah. A good friend of mine who is a financial advisor said that we have been conditioned in our lives to be very good in climbing the mountain. And the mountain could be representative of anything. In his realm as a financial advisor, it means wealth accumulation. But no one has really taught us how to go down that mountain. So
Yeah.
we just spend ourselves just climbing and climbing and acquiring, or buffering and buffering.
Yeah.
But there's a reason why you acquired all these resources in the first place.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. One thing that just to share really quickly that I'm super glad that I went through as a experience is I went from having a 9 to 5 Google job is very very well paid, to having very low pay as a startup founder for a period of time until we were able to raise money, and it was actually during that time that it made me realize what I actually cared about and what I wanted to spend money on. Because when you have money, you're like, look, I can eat at these fancy dinners, or I think I need, 2 trips a month to like make myself satisfied. And when I had
Mhm.
less, it actually made me realize that I don't really like, these are the core things I need. I need community, right? I want to be surrounded by people that make me laugh, that I admire, all these things. I also need a creative outlet as well, right? I've been a musician my entire life, and I need to do something like that. But outside of that, I realized I don't need very much, right? I don't need to buy nice bags or fancy clothes or things like that. And so I'm kind of glad I went through almost like a reversal, right? Of like what you typically would expect as like, increase in income that you get year after year. I basically had that like diminished like 70%, right? Very, very abruptly. But it made me realize like what exactly is a minimum to power my own happiness in terms of money.
And how did you know when was the right time for you to like, okay, it's I have enough, I'm going to pivot, or like I'm ready to take this risk? Because I'm sure a lot of people are interested. They want to leave their jobs, they want to do something they want to do, but then at the back of their mind they're thinking, hey, can I really do it? How did you make that decision?
Yeah. So I think there's like a optimal moment for everybody where I call it like optimal like experience and an optimal risk-taking behavior. So I knew I was never going to be the 21, 22-year-old startup founder, right? Like as much as I admire people who like out the gate of university like go and start a company, like I wanted to be able to like build my network, build a little bit more of a financial safety net, and then build some skills, right? At like, you know, great companies that can teach you like, product management or design, things like that. Um, so there's a point in time where I felt like, okay, I will have enough confidence in my skills and experience to go start a company. But at the same time, I didn't want to wait so long that like my risk taking appetite would go down, right? So life can happen, right? What if, I at my certain point in my time want to start a family or want to like settle down or do certain things, right? And at the time I was 28, 29, and I felt like it was like that like sweet spot, right? Where I felt like I was confident enough in my experience, but I still hadn't like, you know, like set myself up to a point where I had like dependents or other people who my risky behavior would have to kind of like, have to deal with, right? So that's how I made the decision, at least from that point of almost like a mathematical point of view, right? But for other people, I think it doesn't necessarily have to be like a one and done kind of decision. Like I realized I was pretty like I kind of brute forced it. I just left and tried to start something. And I think partly it was because it was COVID. I had a lot of free time. And I'm also just a bit more of a like 0 to 100 kind of person. I'm like fine to just go and like do the more hardcore version. Other people might not necessarily find that suitable, and I think that's fine. So I talk to a lot of people in big tech who are thinking of or in the process of actually leaving to start their own ventures, right? And some of them asked me like should they do the same thing I do? And I always tell people like, look, I'm a data point for you, right? But I'm different. You might have different obligations, you might have different risk appetite. So if you want to do nights and weekends building up a community, building up an audience, or doing some part-time and developing a prototype or sharing that with the customers, that's fine to do for a period of time. But just know that like you're not going to move as fast as if you were to do a full time. And if that timeline's okay for you, then I don't see anything wrong with it. So yeah, those are just some of my thoughts around like taking the leap. The last thing I'll add is there's a lot of people that feel like uh, they don't know how to time box it. They're almost like, okay, if I leave, then what? Like, what if I fail? What if
Mm.
there's always that concern, right? And the thing is, you should go in with the mindset that like, a, if you do fail, you still feel like this was a good experience, right? So it's almost like at a bare minimum, you're like, I learned something, I met some cool people, I tried something, and I'm happy with that. Like, if you have that mindset, it's gonna work in your favor than if you're like, I'm only gonna be happy if I reach X, right? So you have to like the journey, appreciate the journey versus just the results, at the end. Yeah.
Cool. Well, what I hear from you, which I'm quite envious of, Sherry, is I think you early on you had a strong sense of self awareness, and you at least knew that hey, at some point your risk appetite may be diminished. You might live with certain regrets. So these sort of influence a little bit of how you sort of took the leap. If I can share a little bit about my taking the leap. Earlier, you mentioned that hey, a lot of people in big tech or working corporate jobs are thinking when to move, and then eventually it's up to them to take a leap as well. That's not always the case. There's actually another scenario, which is mine, which is that you actually
Yeah.
get laid off, and then I'll be honest with you. If I wasn't laid off, I would still have continued doing the job because it was a dream job. I
Yeah.
really enjoy the work I have and the people I work with, and the remuneration was very very lucrative, especially in this market. So sometimes life, and this is my favorite quote right now, is that sometimes life you don't jump, you get pushed.
Yeah.
So it's just that while getting pushed is getting a bit nervous, but you actually have much more than you actually need if you think about it that way, and it comes to money, and have a little bit of faith in ourselves. We are resourceful people. We can make it work, and just take a bet on ourselves, I guess.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think again, everyone's journey is different, right? And I mean, in your case, it's almost like maybe for you it's almost like a silver lining in the whole situation where this might have been something that you wanted to do for some time, and then it's like, okay, well, now is maybe the moment, right? Because I have the headspace to be able to pursue this. I love how you're very open about talking about this in your YouTube channel. I do feel like a lot of people will resonate with it, right? Because it's a tough topic to talk about. A lot of people may still have emotional scars from the experience, so they don't maybe want to talk as publicly about the experience as well. So I wanted to see if you're willing to share a bit about how that was for you, and then how did that kind of inspire you to eventually start this YouTube channel where you're helping other people in similar shoes be able to still feel secure and still feel like a peace of mind, right, with their financial future despite job instability.
Sure. Yes, I'm very happy to share. And you're absolutely right. It's taboo for us to talk about it, to being laid off, because um, the self, at least in some sense, self-imposed um, repercussions of it is massive. Because one, we have a huge we we put a huge identity to where we work. Even
Yeah.
the way I introduced myself earlier to you, right? I listed out all my career um, chapters because that's really how we define ourselves and how we perceive ourselves in the eyes of others. And how I sort of thought about layoffs in a different way because when I first graduated in 2010, that was just towards the end of the subprime
Yeah.
financial crisis. It's a great times, by the way. Um, if I had the guts to invest back then, my portfolio would have been much more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember Citibank was 50 cents. That was how much it
Oh
was
my
back then.
goodness.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Citibank was, yeah. So I saw layoffs happen. So I grew up with that. I saw that happen in my family as well. So came to the realization that eventually layoffs are going to hit us in our career at some point. So why not prepare for it? So think of it like having an insurance against a layoff. So I started to think, okay, how can I prevent a situation where I'm severely traumatized or wrecked by a layoff? So that then kickstart my entire journey towards having a early investment, to start investing early, to enjoy the effects of compounding growth, and start to building up my own portfolio really early on. The other thing that really influenced me to and change my relationship with layoffs is if right now if you say you've uttered the word layoffs in any social um, setting, people get very uncomfortable because it's a very sensitive and taboo topic. And I was thinking, how can I sort of shift
Yeah.
that perception, right? And I was reading the book Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb. I hope I pronounced his name correctly. And in that book, he mentioned there are three states. There's a weak state, and he gave an example of a glass, a vase. If it's in a fragile state, you throw it, it will smash. If it's in a strong state, you throw it, it doesn't smash, but it retains its actual physical form. So to me, I was thinking, okay, a layoff is like if you are wrecked by it because financially you it was a big blow, you are fragile. If you have enough savings and enough investments, it is that you are strong. You are strong. But then in that book, there's actually a third state called anti-fragile, which is if you throw the vase, it not only retains its shape, but it's actually stronger as well. So then I was
Mm-hmm.
thinking, how can a layoff be anti-fragile? How can you actually in another way benefit or become stronger from a layoff? And I saw it as a way that once you have passed the stage of being fragile and you're stronger financially, then the layoff could actually just point you in the right direction, and actually bring you to the next chapter. And in my case, starting this channel, talking about layoffs, talking about your relationship with money, your relationship with your career, how do you advance? And the moment I dropped that video, Sherry, I have hundreds of messages overnight, just a few
Yeah.
nights ago, where people are just saying, hey, I relate to your message. I 100% agree. I wish I knew this earlier. So there is an appetite and there's a huge community out there that is redefining their relationship with their career, what does layoff actually means and what it represents, and also their relationship with money as well.
Yeah. No, I mean, I love it because, like a lot of times, like we just want to be around people who perhaps can understand and make us feel comfortable talking about a certain topic, right? And but a lot of people are afraid to take that first step because they might be thinking, okay, if I talk to this person about it, I don't know if they are in the fragile state and I might be bringing up something that's quite sensitive that they're still kind of healing from, right? But when you just put yourself out there and just share your story, like it gives people the ability to reach out and have those conversations. And actually that conversation is it's part of the healing process, right? So I love what you did, and just kind of starting that dialogue and making people feel comfortable talking about it.
Yeah.
How Oh, sorry, go on.
No, no. I just want to add that, like, I guess it's also perhaps like our generation that feels a bit more difficult opening up. I'm quite optimistic of the future generation where sometimes they may be criticized that the younger generation is a bit more like open in terms of just having no filters in sharing. But I think it eventually, I'm optimistic that we will have a healthier
Yeah.
relationship when it comes to money.
Absolutely. One thing that I started doing that I previously actually was uncomfortable doing is I've been very open about sharing what I do with my money, my investments. Quite honestly, you can probably kind of figure out how much I have and how much I'm what I'm deploying, and it's very much like it's almost like uh, very unconventional because a lot of people think of your own money as a very private matter, and
Yes.
if you put that stuff out there certain times, like on Reddit, as you know, like you don't always get the best response from people, right? But I found that in the right communities and right audiences, people have actually liked that because it makes them a lot more open about talking about it as well, right? And so again, it's not to say that everybody should share as openly as I do. There's no pressure on that. But for me, I wanted to be authentic to say, like, look, when I'm talking about something, right, it's because I'm invested in this position, right? I'm not just saying it. It's like there's a weightage, right, to it. So I do hope that like the younger generation, yeah, continues to be open because I feel like the best learning experiences I have in life is when I get to learn from people just like me, right? Who are also open about sharing.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned about people not being, it's almost like you are afraid to share that information, and people are also afraid to receive that information because they feel that it's either like that's your personal data, or your personal situation. But it also then makes them confront that, like, hey, what am I doing with my own money? I spoke with a friend over the weekend, and he said that when he was growing up, money was never a conversation at the dinner table
Yeah.
within their family. And I realized that's true for a lot of us, right? And I guess our parents sort of wired that in us because if you talk about money, the only time you talk about money is when you don't have it. And
Yeah.
therefore, so if you're talking about it, then you get your kids to worry because then it's like, oh, is our family fine? Is mommy, daddy, struggling? So they don't talk about money. And then now we then have sort of that same sort of mindset where we don't really talk about it, and through the good work of what you're doing and what I'm trying to do, I think hopefully we can sort of change that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like when you, for instance, like talk more openly about, you know, layoffs and how like your identity shouldn't be entirely tied to a job, right? Redefining that. I think the same thing with money as well, right? I mean, your net worth is not your self-worth, right? Even though we're a net worth tracking app, but it's really about resource planning. Everyone has different situations, right? I think I got incredibly lucky to start my career working in big tech, got RSUs that grew, right? But not everybody has those situations, right? And so I think one thing that I find that's been helpful, and I practice this actually with a lot of founder groups as well, is when you share, it should always be like you should feel like you're talking to a psychologically safe space where there's no judgment, right? What you're sharing is your own story. It is your own lived experience, and nobody could have gotten to that point because this is your own story, right? And then when other people share their own experiences or want to like provide other alternative perspectives, it's always treated as an input, right? And so it's almost like, hey, these are the things that happen to us, right? There are like parts of our life that are traits, right? Okay, this is how much we have, what we did to reach that, you know, certain amount, etc. But they're not who we are. But we can help each other, right, by figuring out, you know, what to do to improve a potential situation. But what works for me, what works for someone else, doesn't necessarily work for everybody. And nothing that like, you know, I shares should be taken as face value of like
Yeah.
what everybody should do, right? So I think being able to respectfully talk about these things and knowing that there's differences in people's personalities and circumstances, yet still being able to like piece together learnings, I think that's what makes me really excited about like, you know, the world moving forward when it comes to personal finance, right? I don't think that the answer is that we all get financial advisors and figure out our lives that way. I think it's actually how do we empower ourselves to feel more comfortable with these decisions. And one of the best ways is just to talk to people like yourselves. I mean, even just like me having this conversation with you, I feel like I'm learning as well. So yeah, that's something I really do care about.
Cool. And when you're speaking to people, do you also share? Like, do you have any frameworks, or do you have any like general roadmaps that you share with people in terms of how they should be thinking about their finances?
Yeah, I think I always start out with what is your goal and what do you care about, right? Um, People's goals might be different. Some people are just like, look, I don't have a specific number, but I just want to beat inflation and I don't want to lose money, right? And that's a very, very different strategy than someone who's like, I want to reach financial freedom in my 40s and have about 3 million, right? Very different goals. One will obviously have a much more aggressive portfolio, right? That would kind of be able to help someone potentially reach that, right? Then I then ask about like what they care about and kind of how they psychologically think about money. And sometimes these are tricky, right? Because if you ask something like, what's your risk appetite? You don't always get the best answer. But I just ask them, look, 2022 happened. The market went down 20%. Google went down, what, 30, 40%. How did you feel? Did you want to sell? Right. So that's behavior is the best way to tell. Like, during past events, did you feel like you just emotionally hated the losses and do not want that volatility? Or you're somebody who was like, you know what, it's fine. These are cyclical things. I'm just holding and, in a 30-year time period, it's fine. If you're the latter and let's say plus plus, like you like doing angel investing or doing other things that are higher risk, then that gives a lot more flexibility around, okay, what kind of instruments or what kind of things you can look into, right? I think the other thing that people miss out on sometimes when it comes to like, their investment strategy is actually what they enjoy learning about or enjoy doing, right? One example is like my parents are Asian, they're Chinese, or, they were born and raised in China. They have this like mentality of like, you need to buy property because that's the proper thing that you do as an adult and it's a good investment. And I've written about this before as well, but like I'm somebody who just is not that interested in property. I'm a happy renter. I also don't really necessarily see myself being making passive income through property. Not because I don't think other people shouldn't do it, but I have commitment issues when it comes to investment, so I like liquid assets.
Yeah.
And then B, I don't like to read about properties as much as like I do enjoy reading about tech, right? And so if you are responsible for your own portfolio, you need to do your due diligence, keep up with the markets, things like that. And you don't feel like it's a chore when you enjoy the subject. If I own property and I was renting it out for an income, I don't know if I don't think I'm going to enjoy that. So I think, again, knowing what you care about, knowing what you value, knowing who you are, then can help you at least craft what the techniques or strategies can be to reach your goal. So I hope that answers your question, but I think
Yeah.
that's so much more important than someone being like, Sherry, what should I invest in? I'm like, look, I can't tell you that unless you give me a little bit more detail about your goals and what you care about.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned about property, and you immediately triggered a reaction out of me because I grew up in that environment as well. I think many of us, whether you're Asian or not, have a, can I say, like, unhealthy obsession about property.
Yeah.
Um, it's like the only definition of who you are and your social status is how many properties you have. And then
Yeah.
after you have acquired a property, Sherry, we then start to compare what postal code you have. So
Yeah.
it's kind of silly, right? And I agree with you. I also don't own anything, and I don't own any property. I'm also renting, and I agree with you that there is some value to that flexibility, that liquidity that I think the previous generations obsession with property um, perhaps didn't factor in, or at least maybe they didn't
Yeah.
have the luxury of thinking in this way that we now have. Um, yeah. So, do you see yourself like renting forever, or eventually you will be getting a property?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think for my stage in life right now, I don't foresee that, especially as I'm running a company and there's obviously, uncertainty around financial situation as well. But I do see potentially in like a 15-year time frame, it could be possible. Um, for only two reasons, right? I think number one is that I decide that I want to have a primary residence that I own. I can renovate, I can make it my own. I'm treating that basically like an expense, to be honest, right? I'm not treating it like this is the
Mm,
best investment that's going to beat the market. Like, that's not my mentality. I'm going to go in with it. It's going to be an emotional decision. I'm going to spend this money because I enjoy it, right? The other part that I think could change is, hopefully, knock on wood, like, I have even bigger portfolio maybe in that time frame, so that the down payment into the house won't feel like a large percentage of my portfolio, right? Like, again, like, I don't really want anything to be more than 10 to 20% of my investment portfolio. Again, it happened with Google, obviously with RSUs, but I don't want that to be something I consistently have. So when I get to a point where the investment into a property or buying a property, living there, isn't like a huge kind of percentage of my overall portfolio, then yeah, diversification, sure, that might be okay. I'm not there yet, right? So I think it's something that I can reconsider, but I'm certainly not like someone who just takes, like, elders' advice at face value and just apply it to my life, because I want to make sure, like, I'm living the life that I want to live, that makes sense for me, not living for someone else's life from a very different context, right? And that's the way, again, I approach any of these conversations talking about finances. Like, you have to know that I'm not you and you're not me, but maybe
mm.
something I say is useful, but make sure you have a filter, right? You're thinking critically about what that advice actually means.
Yeah, yeah. I guess some of our audience are then thinking about like, hey, yes, that makes all sense, but then with property prices, just shooting up so fast, there could be some arguments where we would just buy it in as early as you can so that you lock in at a lower price,
Yeah,
so that you can actually participate. Then I guess again it's back to your advice, right? Like at what stage are you at, and what priorities you have, and what goals do you have to then make the right sort of allocation in terms of your finances.
absolutely. So we are coming towards the end of the hour. I will end with maybe just one question for the audience, right? Looking back now, working in your careers in banking, in tech, and now doing your own channel, what would you want to tell younger Shao about how he should be thinking about money, right? Either, piece of advice that would help him feel like better about the situation, or piece of advice that you know could help him better in the future. Like, what would that be?
Um, if I really have a time machine to go back earlier, I would tell the younger version of myself to just buy the S&P 500 and buy Bitcoin, and and whatever you can retrospectively on hindsight think about. But for more realistic sort of advice, I think two things. One is to play the money game. There's no shame in playing the money game, but what you do not want to do is to play the status game. And I learned this from a podcast with Naval Ravikant, and he said that do not confuse the game you're playing. Playing the money game is a game of abundance, where it's a multiplayer game. Everybody can win. But if you're playing a status game, you're always chasing to be first place, be it the brand new car or the brand new bag, which I find myself very obsessed when I was much younger. So that's the first advice I'll give myself. And the second advice is that one, because I was always working in the corporate world, to know the difference between active income and passive income. So in today's economy, we have to be very active in our active income. We can't just stay there and hopefully rest and vest, or hopefully get rewarded for our loyalty. We need to keep advancing ourselves, to pick up new skills, and to also see what opportunities are outside of your company. You may have to job hop to get that promotion that you want. So be active in your active income and be passive in your passive income. So there's a reason why long-term investing works, and why legendary investors like Warren Buffett recommends it. But when I was younger, I was actually doing the opposite, which was that I was very active in my passive income by trading, by picking up whatever new stocks that I heard of, and I lost a lot of money. In fact, all of them I've lost. And I was very passive in my own active income, which is my job. So I was
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
waiting to be promoted. I was waiting for opportunities to drop on my lap, thinking that if I keep quiet and do my work hard, things would happen. So that's what I would think. Like the do not confuse being active for passive income and passive for your active income. And that's really what I'm trying to do with my channel as well. That anyone working 9 to 5 can be financially free. You don't need to take unnecessary risks. You don't need to have side hustles. You don't need to feel pressured to be a founder like yourself if you really have no inclination to do it. Just
Yeah.
have the discipline to play the long-term games, to play the money game. You can build up your own financial freedom that way.
Amazing. Well, Shao, I had a really good time talking to you. I feel like we can definitely do more sessions in the future because we haven't dived as much into your channel as I would have liked, but got to spend a lot of time just hearing about your story. So I just want to thank you for your time today. Really, really enjoyed it and look forward to more hopefully in the future.
Thank you, Sherry. Take care.